Okay, folks, I think we are just about quorate in that we require 4 members, so we can make a start as it's just after 2 o'clock. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Accounts Committee on Friday, the 1st of December 2023. I'd like to begin by welcoming the committee members who have joined us today for this meeting at Newshire Hall and those watching the live stream on YouTube. When he arrives, I will welcome our new co-opted member, Mohammed Hussein, who's coming up from London, who's attending his first meeting. And in particular, I'd like to welcome Sarah Brown and Emma Larkham, ladies, from KPMG. KPMG being our new auditors who are taking over from Ernst & Young. Looking on virtually are Mairead Claydon, head of internal audit, and Jacob McHugh, who is from Ernst & Young. So that they will join us for the relevant items that they've got. The County Council allows filming and photography at its meeting, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There's no fire alarm scheduled for today. So if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit, which is through the middle doors on my left, and assemble in the car park. So we move on to item 1, which is apologies and declarations of interest. Dawn.
Apologies from Councillor Maguire and also from Stephen Moyer. I've also just received a message from Councillor Whelan to say she's running late, but she will be joining us.
Thank you. And I suspect Councillor Gay has also caught up in traffic as well. Alan, were you signalling?
Just to declare an interest in that I'm a member of the Pension Fund Committee and the Pension Investments Subcommittee.
You're too keen. So the next item is, does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? We've had Councillor Sharps, Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair, and I make the same declaration.
Thank you. We're asked to approve the minutes of the last meeting on the 28th of September as an accurate record. If any committee member wants to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes only, can they do so now? I see no objections, so we will take that as carried unanimously. On that basis, the committee members, I will sign the minutes at the end of the meeting. We also have a copy of the updated action log. And do members have any questions or comments on any of those? The item about BDO will cover later on to Tom Kelly's paper. Anything else? Just while you're thinking, on page 14, about 133, I did raise about the workload of internal audit staff, and I've lost it now. Sorry, and on page 14, item 133, I did raise at the meeting of the East of England Audit Committee group on the 11th of October about the considerable pressures on local authority audit teams. It says here, to see if they could help steer the national debate apart from getting virtual nods that yes, that is a problem with lots of local authorities, I didn't get any realistic answers to the concerns which we raised, but they have been raised, so that is complete. There are various other ones which are in progress, which we will cover either later in the meeting or subsequent meetings. Any comments, questions? No, thank you very much. So we move on to the debt management update. Beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. I do need to record that there are no petitions or public questions today. So now we can move on to the debt management update. Thank you, Tom, if you want to start.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to introduce the report, but also with me in the room are Alison Balcombe from Financial Operations and Richard Gibson from Adult Social Care Financial Operations, and Dean Lever, I think, is also available remotely. This report sets out the Council's debt management position. The committee will recall it's been reviewing the position every 6 months. And as we say in the report, there's a mixed picture on the metrics for debt management for the council overall. Although the percentage of income collected within 90 days is meeting the target level, we do have an issue in that the absolute amount of overdue debt has risen by approximately 7 million over the last 30 months. So we'll see an important context to set to this position. It reflects an increase in the amount of billing the council is undertaking, particularly to the adult social care client group. That in itself reflects the inflationary pressures we see in the wider economy, and then the macroeconomic issues in terms of cost of living and people's ability to pay. This, of course, interacts with wider demand patterns as well, and service issues that we're seeing across the wider public sector, both for the council directly and where we have dependencies on other public sector partners as well. Coming into the report, the committee will see at the table at 2.1.2 that we have a debt position at the point that this report was produced of 29.8 million overdue debt. Compared to the same month last year, that is an increase of 3.8 million. Interestingly, it remains a movable picture and potentially influenced by individual large amounts. And rolling that position now on to November, we now know that position as at today. The current debt position is now down to 23.3 million, and interestingly, compared to 2 years ago, that figure was at 25.6 million. So some progress there, but undoubtedly we do have a pressure at aged debt over 90 days, and particularly in the adult social care client group where the trajectory is undoubtedly upwards. The table at 2.2 then provides more detail about that adult social care client debt and the aged profile of that debt, and also the kind of key categories and reasons that those debts are linked to. Comes through very clearly, of course, that the ultimate adult social care is a means tested service, and the important thing to say here is that we're dealing with vulnerable clients who are paying for their care. The top two reasons you'll see on that grid in terms of overdue debt sort of reflect the wider complexity. Court of protection, power of attorney matters relate to where clients have lost capacity to deal with their finances themselves. And the report goes on to deal with some of the growing issues we've seen nationally with the Court of Protection in terms of delays in their work, which enables improved collection in that area. And then the other area where we have a large amount overdue is the deceased pending probate and settlement of account. Report then goes on at 2.3 to look at the collection rates. I think in some ways this is quite encouraging information, again looking back in the previous years at the month by month performance, and that we do see that collection rate maintained as time moves through, and some of the positives in terms of debt collection. But coming into this year's business planning cycle, we're very conscious of those issues facing adult social care, and that has led to an increase in our bad debt provision. This to a deep dive process chaired by the chief executive earlier in the year that has formalised and articulated a number of actions to address the issues that we see in this area. The report then goes on to set some of those out in more detail. They include in our financial assessment team addressing some of the backlogs that we've seen in assessment capacity there through more resource, both internally and recruiting external support with that. The improved digitalisation, so the portal used for interactions with clients and suppliers in the adult social care market, and then some of the internal actions we're taking as well in our debt team in terms of strengthening our capacity in that area, additional management support, and channel shift activity as well, so reducing the number of invoices sent out by post, an important modernisation and progress that's being made there as well. The final item I'll mention is the income management system. This has been a project implemented across the shared service partnership, and I think will help us with the timely allocation of debt. You'll pick that up as one of the reasons earlier in the report. So those are the things I wanted to say in introduction. In short, acknowledging we do have a growing issue with adult social care debt, but there are actions across the council to respond to that and reduce that growth going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Alison or Dean, is there anything you want to add, or are you happy to answer questions as they come to it?
Happy to answer questions, Chair.
So before I open it up, can I just welcome Mohammed Hussein, who is our independent member that we have co-opted onto the committee to provide us with some external expertise. Let's very quickly go around the table, Mohammed. I'm not expecting you to remember all these names, but you'll be able to read our labels as we go past. So starting with Tom, and we'll go around.
So Tom Kelly, Service Director for Finance and Procurement.
Alan Sharp, Councillor for the Wood Ditton Division.
Chris Bowden, the Councillor for the Whittlesea North Division.
Dawn Cave, I clerk these meetings.
Michael Hudson, Executive Director, Finance and Resources, Section 151 Officer.
Jeff Seave, Councillor for St Neots, the Eatons. You're welcome.
Sarah Brown, KPMG, audit partner, will be your partners, your auditors from the year ending 2024.
And Emma Larkham, Director from KPMG as well.
And Sarah and hang on, sorry, and Sarah and I'm both new to this. This is their first meeting as well. Sarah and Emma. Sorry, Dean.
Richard Gibson, Social Care Finance, no problem.
Alison Balcombe, Head of Finance Operations.
And Dean Leather, Strategic Exchequer Manager.
Two in the corner who probably won't pick up. Okay, and then there will be a couple of other people who are looking on virtually that you'll get to see later on. So we've done the first few items, and this is the first substantive item, which you've heard most of the introduction from Tom. So this is opportunity where we'll open it up to questions. Clearly, the adult social care debt is a big concern of the committee, except that some of the things about the Court of Protection are national issues which we can only influence, we can't necessarily solve, but it's still a big concern of the committee. It looks fairly positive from reading the report that there's an awful lot of activities going on, but let's see what others say. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. As you're aware, it's an issue which I've raised repeatedly over some years now in terms of the way in which we deal with our debt. And I have to say that I very much welcome the appointment of our new strategic exchequer manager. I believe that that will be, should be, a major opportunity for us to get a tighter control over the debt position. And it's very clear from the report that significant elements of the debt that we're talking about, both overall debt and debt in adult services and client contributions, a significant element of it is outside our control to be able to do any more than we're currently doing. That's quite clear. We can only influence those things which we actually have some ability to manage. And when you have a person who unfortunately dies, and when you're in a position of waiting for an estate to be sorted out, we as a council aren't in a position to be able to take any action more quickly than would otherwise be the case. So I fully accept that there are some elements in here which are more difficult than others. In the overall debt position, which is given in paragraph 2.1.2, I again note the quantity of the unapplied receipts which we have recorded, and it's a difficult issue. We're not dealing with a corner shop here where you know exactly what's being paid for every time it's being paid, but I really would like to see that unapplied figure coming down, which means basically resolving the identification and the posting of monies received at an earlier stage than we currently do. If you don't keep up to date with the allocation of monies coming in, it makes the job of chasing monies which are outstanding that much more difficult if you don't actually know necessarily everything that's outstanding. So the first request I'd make, I don't, and if someone wants to answer this one now, I'm happy to, but I'm not expecting a magic answer. But the first request that I think that needs to be made from this committee is that greater resource needs to be put in to ensure that monies coming in don't remain unapplied for any longer than is absolutely necessary. I think I'll leave it at that for my first question, if I may, because it's a relevant point to stop.
Jeff, is this related or?
Follows on, actually. So can I turn it into a question as well? I mean, I've heard and I understand the issues with adult social care, but we're looking at the end, one end of a telescope here, and we're looking at the end result. These are the debts we have to collect. Now, notwithstanding everything that Councillor Bowden has said, with obviously the difficulties of, for example, people dying and not being able to settle their relatives settle the estate, debts tend to arise also at the beginning stage when there's an assessment. And I just wanted to ask, I mean, you have indicated that there will be additional resources in the assessment team, which is great, but to what extent could some of this debt not arise in the first place if there were a more detailed assessment so that you knew exactly that these particular cases would never be able to pay? So, I mean, you may be bound by statute to raise invoices, but or try to raise charges. But if we're never going to collect them, it's only going to appear on this report and then eventually be written off.
Hang on just a minute. Alan, have you got a question as well? And then we might answer these three.
Yeah.
Come back.
Michael, I won't duplicate what's been asked. My question is just trying to get my head around the figures, because in 2.1 we say the 2.11 we say the overall total debt position is 29.8. Then we go to table 2.12 and we've got heading overdue, and then in current month we've got 29.8. So are we saying that all of our debts are overdue, which I don't necessarily believe? And then my second question is around the unapplied bit, which I can leave till later.
Okay. So
Hi.
Yeah, go on, Alice.
Yeah, sorry. To answer the last point, the current month debt is what we're reporting in October. the age debt in October in that current month.
Yeah.
So that's the outstanding debt, if that makes sense. But yeah, so that's
It does.
not-
If I can, sorry,
Yeah,
if I can come
sorry.
back, Chair, sorry. But presumably not all of that 29.8 is overdue. That's
the overdue debt. Yeah,
That's the
it's
overdue
called
debt.
current because it's the current month in that reporting
Okay.
cycle.
all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then regarding the unapplied, so where we've mentioned digitalisation and direct debit, we want to work to increase the direct debit uptake. What happens is somebody will pay the bill, not put a correct reference in. We can apply it to a customer, but we can't apply it to the actual invoice. So there's significant resource that is required for that. And also, unfortunately, with the NHS, when they pay a large amount of money, there isn't the references in the remittance advices to allocate. So we spend a considerable amount of time trying to allocate the right invoices against the cash received. So it is work in progress and we are starting to get it down.
Can we continue on the questions of unapplied debt? Because I know we've got other things on this paper, but since it's being mentioned now, it seems this is not the first time we've had discussions in this committee about unapplied debt. And I just wonder whether further attention needs to be given to unapplied debt to try to ensure I'm not actually asking for additional resource to be put in to reduce this. I'm asking for a significant change to take place in terms of the process which is creating this unapplied debt. Now, where there is direct debits involved, I'm really unsurprised that we wouldn't have references already in place which would allow us to apply monies quickly. But the most obvious one, which has just been mentioned, is to do with the NHS. And the fact that the NHS, when making payments, aren't providing us with the data which we need in the form that we need it. And I can't believe that it's beyond the wit even of the NHS administration to change their processes, because they must know what they're paying. And if they know what they're paying, then it must be possible for them to provide us with that data in a format which is going to be able to be utilized by us, preferably automatically, but if not automatically, then manually. And it doesn't seem to me to be the most difficult thing in the world to ask them to explain what it is they're paying, when they're paying it, because they've already done that calculation themselves in order to justify making the payment. So I know we're talking about another organization here, the NHS, but do we need to raise this matter to a higher officer level so that heads are banged together so that we get a common sense answer out of this? Because having a significant amount of resources, we've just been told, being utilized to try to identify what's being paid when there should be automated processes in place to allow that to happen. And we've been talking about this now for some considerable time. It just seems to me that action needs to be taken.
Thank you. So my perspective on unapplied debt is we are in a better position than we have been for some time. So Councillor Bowden referred to the size of the organisation. We're receiving, in the region of £2 million per day on average. Actually having £1 million unapplied at the end of the month is probably within those tolerances. The previous month of 4.8 million, not so desirable. We do have further metrics on income allocation. So I think perhaps what we should do is circulate to the committee some additional information that provides some further assurance on that. The issues Alison refers to with the NHS are absolutely there, and with perhaps changed arrangements with the LDP, the risk on that may increase. So we'll pick up that point as well.
I know we've got to move on from unapplied debt, but that's extremely helpful. I wonder if it's possible, when this information is provided to us, if we could be given the unapplied debt breakdown by period, so we can see how much of the unapplied debt is for receipts which came in the previous 30 days, how much is 30 to 60, 60 to 90, or how much is 3 years plus, or whatever it may be. Could we have such an analysis, please? Because I'm hoping and expecting that the overwhelming majority of unapplied debt is 0 to 30 days.
Yep, happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Mohammed.
I just had a question on the metrics set for sort of tracking the performance or the level of debt over 90 days. I think we mentioned it's still within the percentage range. It's not gone over that range. Because the first question was, what is that percentage that we've set? And the second question is, given that the level of billables is increasing, should we be looking at a second metric that maybe looks at the absolute amount of debt going overdue, just to make sure that we escalate that early as well.
So the 85% is the target in relation to the first answer, and we do measure that absolute amount overdue as well, and that is the one that is off track. I think actually in preparing this report, I think we need to perhaps be showing more regularly to Strategy and Resources Committee the distinction between debt that has only just become overdue and debt that's more aged, so 90 days and beyond plus. So we'll continue to look at that area as well.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything we can do about the Court of Protection issues? In that, is there anybody we can influence, like elderly people, to have lasting power of attorney? Would that make any difference if they had lasting powers of attorney and rather than they didn't? Are there other organizations that we should be talking to, trying to persuade that it doesn't help us, it doesn't help them, it doesn't help anybody else if we have these long delays?
Chair, I think I'd say that the voluntary sector actually do a very good job, whether that's Age UK and other organisations like that, in providing information, advice and guidance to families around lasting power of attorney, management of their financial affairs and decisions around health. Equally, council functions provide that same information, advice and guidance, whether that's through adult social care, welfare benefits advisors and so on. The issue specifically is when families or clients aren't able to take that advice and those actions, and they're left in a position where they can't manage their finances, we end up in the route of court of protection or appointeeship, and then we incur those delays.
Okay, final comment, Jeff.
Do you have any comment on what I asked about the assessment process? Clearly, when something happens in the middle of the process, they are paying and then people die or something else happens, that's nothing you can do about, although you probably need to stop billing, I suppose, because otherwise you're just trying to chase something you can't collect. But also, what sort of would a better assessment or a more detailed assessment at the start of the process ensure that invoices are not raised when they shouldn't be? And is there any incidence of that, in fact, or how much of it is within the figures that you've given us?
So I think there's probably a two-part answer to that, Councillor. So for most citizens or most clients who have a financial assessment, they're all carried out to the same standard in the same way, because we have to follow the regulations set out in the Care Act. So there is only one quality, if I can put it in those terms. My function has a backlog within its service, but that doesn't adversely impact the client, because within our charging policy, if the delays are due to the council, in this case my function, then we don't invoice the client until we've done the financial assessment. So if we have delays, so as an example, if I've taken 6 weeks longer to do the task than we should have done, the client doesn't get any backdated charges. They start to get invoiced from when we've done the financial assessment. So I think that's in one element whereby the client doesn't start with arrears, doesn't start with a debt. And that will cover the majority of circumstances. The other circumstance, the second part, in answer to your question, is if a client or their representative chooses to not undertake a financial assessment, so to not disclose their financial circumstances, then they're accepting as being full cost. And we have clients and families who will do that proactively or reactively, depending on their positions. We will then invoice them at the full cost of their care. And it's only then when those invoices arrive on the premises that the client then re-engages with the service and says, I will undertake the financial assessment process. I will disclose my financial circumstances. So within our numbers here, within the age debt, one of the categories is full cost non-disclosure. So this is where a client or a family hasn't disclosed their circumstances. So from our perspective, that will create, let's say, an artificially high debt picture, then when those clients and families do engage and a financial assessment is undertaken, their account is reconciled, and then true invoices issued, and then their debt will be restated.
Not particularly significant, or it is a significant figure.
I think that would, be an action that I would take away if you would like some specific information on that. I think if that would be helpful. I think
Please.
An anecdotal answer might be unhelpful.
Right, thank you very much. And no other comments? Oh, sorry, Alison.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up a little bit on the quarter protection issue that you were discussing there. Now, from a personal perspective, actually involved with a different council, I do stress it is a completely different council to here. And one of the reasons why there are problems is actually down to the council itself, where the council was supposed to actually carry out certain things. We're certain that any of the issues are outside of the council's control, and there are none that are within the council's control to get these COP orders in place.
I wouldn't have any specifics, but I think intuitively and logically we would suggest that if there are any complications, any particular cases, that it might be that in practice or officers haven't completed the various COP forms, as they're called, in the right time and the right manner, and so on and so forth, that will, of course, it will hinder the court of protection in their duties. So I'm sure there will be cases like that, but they will be in the minority.
Okay, thank you. Oh, it's Friday afternoon, Chris.
I did say, Chair, my previous question was just the first one before getting on to the main meat of this paper, which is about the position on adult social care and client contributions. And looking at the analysis that we've been given in section 2.2, which I think is a very helpful overall age debt analysis by debt status. Some of the largest items that we have there are ones which I'm not seeking to push today, things such as what happens with the court of protection, what happens with deceased or pending probate accounts. For the very reasons I said before, they are very difficult by their very nature, and they're not necessarily amenable to being speeded up by this council. What does concern me is where there are things which are under our control, and there are significant amounts which are shown in that aged debt analysis. The first being that £2.4 million worth of debt isn't able to be chased at the moment because we're awaiting a service response. Now, there are all sorts of difficulties in the debt chasing process, but one of them which is under our control is when a query is raised, us answering that query so it's possible to put the account back into the debt chasing process. And whilst you're awaiting a service response, you can't do that. And to have that amount which is outstanding, and in some cases, in 15% of the cases, it's for items which are more than 2 years old. It does concern me, and I wonder how quickly or for how long some debts lie in that awaiting service response category, where debt chasing cannot continue because we ourselves within the council have failed to provide the necessary answer to a question which has been raised on a debt. I'll ask that first question. I'll keep the questions separate if I may, because otherwise they'll get all mixed up.
That's very helpful. Related to that, on that table is also the very high amount on debt team dealing, which presumably has, after the information from the service has come back to you, you're still dealing with it, but that maybe you're dealing with it or you're waiting for something from a client. But do you want to answer Chris's comments first?
As part of the deep dive, we've got a variety of actions in place, which is including working with the service areas. So part of the strategic debt manager's role is working closely with those service areas, a clear escalation route to either Michael or Patrick, the DAS, and also working very closely with Richard's team. So we've got a plan to tackle those. The post is recently, it started in early November, so hopefully as part of the actions and the progress that will progress this item. That role will also support the collection of those that are waiting within the debt service. So we've got a clear action plan for both of those categories.
What I welcome in that is that the next time we get this report, we should see a significant reduction in the awaiting service response category. We've got an action with a result that we can anticipate there. So if that can be noted for the minutes, I think that would be extremely helpful. And I have every reason to believe that once any significant focus is given to this area, that it will be possible to make a significant improvement. So I'm very pleased about that, Chair. The second thing I'd like to just look at are the write-offs or pending write-offs. We've got 130,000 mentioned in this report, but the subject of write-offs is quite a difficult one. And it's not directly connected to what happens with what appears in our accounts, where there is a provision made in our accounts against debt. And unlike what may happen in some other organizations, especially smaller organizations, we will have one policy to do with making a provision in our accounts for potential non-payment, and another policy entirely for the writing off of debt. And I think that I'd be very interested to learn a bit more, not necessarily today, but a bit more about just how we make a decision on the writing off of a debt. And more to the point, is because the amounts involved are quite significant at the end of the day. You're talking about amounts which can be as much as 0.5% of our annual spend, annual receipts rather. So it's quite a significant amount of money potentially. Once debts are written off, which is an internal process, not an external one, do we completely ignore them? Now, if a debt is written off because someone has died, there's nothing in the estate, well, fine. You know perfectly well that's not going to change. But if it's written off because an individual can't be traced, for example, the debt still exists. And I just wonder, when resources permit and when priorities permit, if some of the larger debts which have been written off, especially if it's because no one can be traced, if they are ever even scrutinized to see if some of them could or should be resuscitated and work be done to try to get money back. Now, I fully appreciate we've got system problems here which need to be sorted out, but I get worried when debts are written off and then just forgotten about, and individuals, and I've known some cases, individuals just get away with things because they evade the system. And I see Alison's nodding her head. She knows exactly what I'm talking about there. So I just wonder if we have just given up on all written off debts, or if it's possible at some stage when resource permits that some glance at least can be given to those to see where there is any possibility of anything which is cost effective in terms of attempting to recover some of those.
So I think Councillor Bowden is right to draw that distinction between the accounting a policy effectively for the bad debt provision and our operational procedures for debt write-off. As it stands at the moment, a debt write-off is the end of the process, so it wouldn't be looked at further. But I would stress under those procedures that it is the last resort. It happens after a considerable period of time has elapsed, and that we're satisfied there's no prospect of tracing the debt any further, and it wouldn't be economic to continue. So, in terms of prioritisation and the scale of the issue we face, the suggestion he's made isn't one we've taken up to date so far. And I would just then come back to differentiate that from debts that we might classify as doubtful for the purpose of the bad debt provision, which absolutely remain on the debt system, and we continue to chase those ones.
This matter is going to come back before us repeatedly in the years to come, and I don't want to overstay my welcome with you, Chair, and continue to ask questions. I've raised the ones which most concern me at the moment. There are plenty more questions here, and I know that officers will be looking at a whole host of different issues which are in this, but the prioritisation of the ones where we do have the potential to get results is really important. Having the deep dive is good. Getting the results from that deep dive will be even better. The work of the new strategic exchequer manager, I think, should be very valuable indeed if focused on this issue effectively. And getting some coordination with the NHS just sounds to me like a very sensible thing to do. And I hope that we don't continue to see such large amounts of unallocated cash. And I'll be very interested when we see the age allocation of that unallocated cash when that's sent around to us.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's been a very helpful discussion, and these reports do come back to us every 6 months or so. So certainly for the next one, it'll be useful to have some of the additional information which we've talked about today, and that Chris in particular has highlighted. And then if any of that goes back to strategy and resources and performance, or adults and health, because a lot of the debt is in adults and health, I think that'll be helpful as well. Okay, thank you very much for coming this afternoon. The next item 5 is an update on consultancy and agency spend, and Claire Ellis, as Head of Procurement and Commercial, is presenting this report.
Thank you.
You presenting you're doing it, Claire, via Zoom, and then we'll ask you questions if that's okay. Thank you.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you. So this is the 6-monthly report that you receive on agency and consultancy spend, and hopefully Janet's in the room to answer any questions that you may have on agency spend. So section 2.1 covers consultancy spend. The table at 2.1.1 covers spend over the first 2 quarters by directorate. And then the table at 2.1.4 covers the approval forms and the value of those approval forms. Because of the lag in approvals going through procurement and then awarding, and because the approval forms, because they are submitted prior to procurement, don't contain the names of suppliers, the request that was issued last time about tracking forms through to the ensuing procurement has been very difficult to action. What we have been able to do at 2.1.5 is provide some case studies, if you like, some examples of when the approval form has been progressed through procurement and then to contract award. And the other area that we have tightened up in the last 6 months is that now all consultancy requisitions come to the procurement and commercial team for approval. And because of that, we ensure that those consultancy requisitions have a consultancy approval form in the background so that we can tie up that end of the process. Moving on to agency spend, section 2.2 covers agency spend across the directorates, and section 2.2.6, helpfully HR have provided an explanation, particularly of the spend in children's education and families, and the difficulties, particularly in social care, when it comes to permanent recruitment. I think that was all I wanted to cover by way of introduction, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions, Alan?
I've got 2 questions. One is on 2.1.4, and it's in quarter 2, the Greater Cambridge Partnership, the 1 million. Where does the financial control of that come from? I know that their accounts are hosted by us, for want of a better word. I just wonder where that control comes in from. And the second thing is on 2.2.6, where reading that, there's some costs from the separation of services from Peterborough City Council, which was a decision that the joint administration made. I just wonder what costs of consultancy we've incurred there because of that decision. Thank you.
Claire, do you want to pick up those 2?
Yes, I can do. 2.1.4, GCP is governed by the council's contract procedures, as far as I'm aware. So the governance, Tom's nodding helpfully, the governance for their procurement regime is the same as the council. So in that respect, if they were to submit a requisition for consultancy spend, then that requisition would come through to the procurement and commercial team, and we would ensure that there was an accurate approval form there in the background to enable that spend to go ahead. the question about the decoupling at 2.2.6, that's actually agency spend rather than consultancy spend. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there was an increase in agency spend as a result of the decoupling.
Could you just clarify that point, Claire, that even though these are agency workers, is it correct in saying that as a result of the decoupling, there were additional agency workers because of that process? Is that what this is saying, or are these actually included agency workers and interims in schools that we manage, for example? Sorry, Janet. Carry on.
Yes, I may pass this on to Janet if that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's probably fairer for me to try and answer that one for you. So I think it is fair to say that as a result of the uncoupling of the two authorities, there were some additional costs that were highlighted and scoped out in the committee papers that were subsequently approved by Staffing and Appeals Committee that led to the process that we went through. Where there was additional where the additional costs came in was where we had vacancies. So we had a number of senior posts that were vacant as a consequence of the separation for a period of time. I'm pleased to say those posts have all now been filled. I think the last service director to join us starts on Monday. So all interims that would have been covering those posts will by that point have ceased to be engaged for us, but that was a substantial cost during that period of time that's contributed to that those figures for children's education and families particularly.
Okay, thank you. And the £1 million is a very round number. Am I right in thinking that that's the maximum that they wanted approving, and then they're going to potentially spend up to that limit? They won't necessarily spend all of it.
I think that one's on the consultancy spend, Claire, isn't it? Sorry
yes,
to back that back to you.
Yeah. So the approval forms work in the way that, as you quite rightly say, Chair, the director or the service will apply for approval to cover the maximum that they would expect to spend under that particular consultancy requirement. And it may well be that as they procure and redefine their specification, they don't require that amount of spend.
Okay, thank you. Alan, does that answer your questions? Yeah. Anybody, Jeff?
Just a question of clarification, actually. As between consultancy and agency, is the consultancy spent all on expertise that we do not have in-house or we cannot access? But our agency is presumably additional resource that we don't have or require. I just the opposite of what Chair has just asked about the spend of £1 million. I just wonder what expertise we bought in for 500 quid. It just seems a very small figure for an expert. I don't know, maybe just one day of consultancy, but the essential question is it
yes.
expertise that we do not have?
That's absolutely spot on. Yes, it's bringing in expertise that we don't have within the council, whereas agency workers will be filling roles that are vacant for one reason or another and filling those gaps. Yes, that's right. Okay.
Okay, any other questions, Mohammed?
Not a quick question. I appreciate there's a control in place just to make sure that the spend is approved before bringing people in. What I can't get a sense of is what's the kind of budget for this. So we've spent, in 2 quarters X amount, but based on an annual budget, where are we sitting, and are we above and beyond that or not?
So we don't have a budget for agency spend per se. So if a service needs to bring in an agency worker, they would be expected to do that from within their own revenue budget for the workforce budget.
For consultancy as well, or
for this absolutely the same. Yes, yeah. I'm looking at Michael, thinking this, making sure.
There are some exceptions for things like capital schemes where that's different, but when the main,
May I just add to that? I think it may be worth just mentioning to the committee that we have actually just set up some internal controls that take effect from next week around any expenditure on workforce. So we will be starting a new panel process that meets next Friday for the first time, and that will be scrutinising any recruitment, whether that's engaging permanent fixed term workers, agency workers, interims or consultants. Anything will come via that monthly panel, and that will be chaired by the chief executive or section 151 officer. So we are trying to reassure ourselves of the sort of the scrutiny that's being applied to the engagement of people. So hopefully that will translate into the figures that you see next time.
And the procurement training, Claire, that you did was absolutely brilliant and very helpful for us. Is there going to be a similar sort of idiot's guide for members on agency and consultants and the difference and how you engage with them and what we should be asking about them?
There is a consultants policy available, and I'm very happy to do a briefing paper with Janet about how we go about appointing or procuring consultancy and agency staff, if that would be helpful.
Would that be helpful for others? I can see a few nods, but just do the absolute minimum. Don't get too overboard for us. And if it's too long, we won't read it anyways. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you, Claire and Janet. So we have noted the information in the report and the actions being undertaken on consultancy and agency spend. Thank you. We move on to item 6, which is the Pension Fund Annual Report and Statement of Accounts 2022-23. And can I ask Ben Barlow and Fiona Coates to introduce this report?
Thank you very much, Chair. So this is the final draft of the annual report and the statement of accounts that we're bringing to committee. Just as a reminder, the annual report is signed off by the pension committee. It's the statement of accounts that is signed off by the audit and accounts committee. I won't do a page turner because obviously it's quite a large document and I'm sure none of you need that on a Friday. But I will do a whistle stop tour of the accounts if that's okay. So if I can make reference to page 89, which is our fund account. So for any accountants in the room, that's basically the profit and loss. So you can see our contributions have gone up over the year. That's as expected. So within our controls of looking at active members, and within our sort of numbers we'd expect from the valuation that's done every 3 years. There's no surprises there. Transfers in, similar to the payments to, which is basically the transfers out on the 4th line there. It's very much demand-led, but they're both cash positive, so we've had more transfers in than we have transfers out. So I think that's the headline there. Benefits, they've gone up, again, as expected with inflation, and we do a check against those on our pensioner numbers. So pensioner numbers have gone up, inflation's gone up. The figures we're seeing there ties in with those trends that we're seeing. So again, no surprises. Management expenses are pretty much the same. They're slightly down. That's really a reflection of the financial markets over the year and some changes we've made within our asset allocation. So we've moved from some more expensive asset classes into some less expensive asset classes. So again, that's as expected and no surprises there. Investment income has rose a little bit. I would say can be a bit of a red herring, that one. The main thing we ask our fund managers to do for us is return a real market value change in the asset classes that they own. So you need to look at that one along with the bottom line, which is an increase to the size of the fund over the year. Or a decrease, as it might be, and as is the case this year. So the invasion of Ukraine happened on the 24th of February. I think it was 24th. So really, you're looking at a whole year here where we've been you've had the difficulties of inflation and the supply and demand that's led to difficulties in the financial market. So I think really we were expecting a downturn. I remember being here last year and saying, we've had a great year. I wouldn't expect the same for next year. And that's kind of played out really. So it's not as bad as we thought it was. We're sort of in line with benchmarks, and within the investment subcommittee, we've obviously done a lot of work making sure that we are happy with what our asset managers are doing. So to move on to the second half, so page 90 is the net asset statement. So this balance sheet basically. So you'll see investment assets have gone down again, as we're saying, really a reflection of the year financial markets. Investment liabilities are pretty much the same. There's no issues there. Current assets, again, pretty similar. What we're looking at here is sort of accounting timings. So the current assets and current liabilities are really to do with our accruals and prepayments, mainly around things like our contributions that are paid after the end of the year that we need to account for. So again, no big surprises there. For assurance, the draft accounts have been to the pension committee. There was no major concerns raised there. And they will go to the pension committee on the 20th of this month for its sort of final review. I don't want to steal the headlines from Jacob, who's coming up, but the audit findings were that there were clear of material misstatement and non-material misstatement. So we've made all differences, adjustments that they have requested. All those were minimal. They give a true and fair view of the accounts. It's been done in line with SIP for guidance, and we have used the same processes which we've used for the past few years, which incidentally have just won a public finance award in the last week, which we're very pleased about. The one issue that did come up, I know when Fiona brought the audit plan to the committee last time, was the Cambridge and Counties Bank, and in particular those level 3 investments. And so we took away from that a paper should go to the ISC, which we did do last month. I see there's some members who are here with the investment subcommittee. So the plan is that paper will be brought. Unfortunately, we missed the deadline for this meeting due to timings, but we will bring that paper again, the Cambridge and Counties Bank paper, with the assurance that it was seen by the investment subcommittee and they are happy with the investment as it sits and some of the issues around the bank itself. Happy to take any questions. If not, I'll pass on to Jacob, who's online.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben, and congratulations on your award. I think we should record the committee's appreciation for all the work that you do, and congratulations on winning the award. I always look to Alison at this point as chair of the pensions committee. Are you happy with what is being proposed here?
Yes, I'd like to first of all echo your comments there, particularly around achieving this award and around the speed in which they managed to actually get the year-end accounts completed for the auditors, and successfully getting them through audit can be an exciting and challenging time, let's put it like that. But I'd just like to thank them for all their work in getting us to this stage, and I'm quite happy with these as they stand.
Brilliant, thank you very much. This is where colleagues from KPMG start listening in earnest. You're making notes, are you? So they've done a very good job so far. Nick?
Yeah, on the Cambridge and Counties Bank, I'm pleased that the investigation has concluded that it's a sound asset. I have managed to ascertain that it's a joint enterprise with Trinity Hall College in Cambridge, and was planning to have a tutorial from their bursar about exactly how it operates, but it certainly is an extremely curious arrangement and has caused Trinity Hall problems. One of quite a number of problems that particular college has had recently.
Chris, did you want to address that?
Yes,
And then
please. First of all, on the more general paper, I'm more than happy that this is coming forward. It's appropriate. It's quite satisfactory in all the circumstances, and I'll be happy to agree with that. On the subject of Cambridge and Counties Bank, I was the one, if you recall, who raised this. In fact, asked the previous auditors just how appropriate they thought it was for a pension fund to have an asset such as that, comprising something close to 2% of the fund's value. Well, the situation is a little bit less serious now that the amount is little more than 1% of the total fund's value, but that's partly because of the downgrading of the valuation of our investment in Cambridge and Counties Bank. And the very fact that we had this £15.7 million audit adjustment, which took place, admittedly not a compulsory audit adjustment, but one which we accepted, itself just goes to show the unusual nature of that particular type of investment. I was very pleased that this came to the Pension Fund Investment Subcommittee, and we had a most interesting presentation and asked quite a number of questions. I certainly am a lot better informed than I was previously, and I think it will be extremely valuable in February, as is suggested, for this to come to this committee. What I would request is that as much as possible be included in public session as a public paper, but that if there are, and I believe there are, some potentially commercially confidential elements relating to the CCB, and particularly any particular exit strategy there may be, if there's any commercial confidentiality, could it still be included, but as an exempt appendix, so that we, at least as committee members, can see it and can discuss it if we wish in private session, but that as much as possible is in the public arena, because we've got nothing to hide here other than anything which is commercially confidential. We've got nothing to hide. And I don't want my challenge to be treated as in any way a criticism of where we are, merely for us to take note of it. And as I say, I was very reassured by what I heard in the Pension Fund Investment Subcommittee. And I think that Councillor Gay will find from our partner's perspective a very interesting story when he gets to ask that as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chris. Ben, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, we Councillor Bowden raised the same request around an exempt appendix in the subcommittee, and that's what we're planning to do.
Thank you. So do we move on to Jacob McHugh from EY? And Jacob, if you're there, would you care to just report on the audit that you did?
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. So largely would like to echo everything that Ben said. This has been an exceptionally smooth audit, an audit year 5 of 5. So firstly, thanks to the finance team. The other thing I'd just like to do for those that are new to the committee is introduce myself. So Jacob McHugh, Senior Manager from External Auditors. So just in terms of the bits to draw out from our audit results report, I think we will just talk briefly on the 2 corrected differences. And what I'd like to say on both of those is they are timing differences of which the pension fund finance team were fully aware. So these are not, whilst they are badged audit findings, it's definitely fair to say that the pension fund finance team were fully aware that these were part of the process as well. So on page 127, we've obviously talked a bit about Cambridge and Counties Bank. So that 15.7 million downwards valuation was not an issue with the valuation per se. So the valuation sought from Grant Thornton was deemed to be appropriate. It was just that hadn't been posted through the financial statements in their original draft stage. And the second adjustment is common both across pension funds, but across every year as well. So this is the timing difference of the March valuation information being received by the pension fund to put through the accounts. So yeah, both of those differences sort of business as usual and as to be expected. So overall, sort of as clean an audit as could be expected, and certainly a smooth audit. I think it's also fair to say a timely one. So we brought some of those procedures forward, and that was facilitated really well from the finance team as well. So yeah, overall, not too much to say, which I'm sure is welcome news, but happy to take any questions on the detail of that audit results report as well.
Yeah, any questions for Jacob? No. Thank you, Jacob, for all the work that you've done. As you say, a very smooth and satisfactory audit. So excellent. And we'll be seeing you again for the
very shortly.
future audits and for the main accounts, presumably. Because we move on now to the item. We've approved the statement of accounts for the annual report of the pension fund for the 2022-23 financial year, and we've noted the findings of the external audit documented in your audit results report. So then we move on to item 7, which is financial reporting and related matters report. I've got here, can I ask Stephen Howarth, but I guess that means Tom Kelly, to introduce this report. And then Jacob, you may well wish to add some further comments at another time.
Thank you, Chair. So I think overall it's fair to say we're in a fairly similar position to the update the committee received at the last meeting. So just to begin with, the areas where there's been probably the least movement or progress since last time on the objections received in 2017 and 2018. We've continued to follow those up with BDO, both in replies to myself and Michael Hudson. BDO now targeting a December timescale for those replies, and Michael may want to say more on that in a moment.
Tom, should we just pause and do each item in turn? In that the BDO issue in particular is quite a big concern of the committee, has been going on for, I thought, a year, but years, it feels like. So the very latest for those committee members who are not aware is that Michael has drafted a letter to go to all sorts of people, having had conversations with them. He can describe a bit who to whom it's gone, to be signed by Chris, Nick, me, and Alison as the 4 main players on this committee, expressing our frustration about BDO. Do you want to just describe a bit more?
Thank you, Chair. And through you, last committee called for this letter. I approached the various bodies because we don't have one system leader as it stands at the moment, whilst we have FRC moving into shadow form to be replaced by another body, ARGA. The representative bodies are DLUC, NAO, FRC, PSAA, Public Sector Auditor Appointments, and also SIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance Accounting. And the advice at that stage was to await what was happening with the national position in return of the select committee review into the audit backlogs, which we may come back onto in a moment. That has not yet been forthcoming. It was expected, first of all, the end of September, the end of October, then November the 22nd, and the select committee members may have seen reported on the 24th of November, and we still await DLUC's comments. So I don't think it's appropriate to hang on to this letter any further. But if you're okay with that, we will write to all of those, the chief execs or permanent secretaries of each of those bodies today, asking for them to take action. I have also contacted, as Tom noted, the senior partner BDO to enlighten them that would be the course of action, and that we were again disappointed that despite here being quoted in this committee as being the top priority, to then have emails to Tom that unfortunately the NHS's audits then took place by default, therefore means that it is second priority, not top priority. So I've let them know, and I've also let them know that we'll be engaging legal advice about what other legal resolution we have in relation to this. So from today, we'll look to explore the December. Just to clarify, they have said by the end of December 2023, just to be really clear, because noting that today is the 1st of December. So We have been promised an update for the 15th of December by the senior partner, and I will let committee members know of both that and responses that we've received from the various bodies that, if you're in agreement, we'll write out to today.
Yeah, I see that they actually have the effrontery to expect some payment for this brilliant service that they've been rendering us. Do you have an idea about how much that is? And is it possible for us just to decline it on lack of performance?
So any fee uplifts go through the public sector audit appointments. Again, why it's crucial that we are keeping them informed of our disappointment. And certainly, clearly, without, wanting to prejudice future actions, we will take all courses appropriate to challenge and have those negotiations around future fees.
There is a statutory obligation that we have to pay a reasonable amount, I believe. Chris.
Thank you indeed, Chair. I believe that the statutory obligation is to pay a reasonable amount for professional work, and I think that qualification is important. Now, this situation that we're in is really quite embarrassing. Embarrassing for BDO and potentially embarrassing for us, and I'll come back to that embarrassment in a second. I'd like fully to endorse the actions taken by our Section 151 officer, particularly not holding on and waiting to see what developments there are nationally, but proceeding with the letter which has been drafted and to get that distributed. And I think it's entirely appropriate to do so. My understanding is that BDO are seeking to remove themselves entirely from public sector audit work, or certainly from local council audit work. And there are various reasons and rationale behind that, which is not necessary to go into. But I have to say that BDO have not covered themselves in glory in the way in which they have dealt with this matter over the last 6 years. And it could be embarrassing to the council as well for us to be seen to have items still unreconciled, still not signed off, 6 years old and more now. And I think it's really important to put on record the fact that as far as this is concerned, we are not the ones who have been guilty, have been responsible for the delays which have taken place. Where information has been requested from us, we've responded in weeks and sometimes in days to the response to the request for information. And it is on the BDO side that the delays of months and years have taken place. And that's why I wonder whether it's deemed appropriate by the Section 151 officer. And if he doesn't deem it appropriate, then I fully go along with what he says. But I wonder if it's appropriate for us also to publish the letter that we are sending on our website, so that it can be quite clearly seen what it is that we are saying. Now, if our Section 151 officer says it's not appropriate, I, of course, will go along with what he says. But if it is potentially possible for us to do so, I think it's important that we get out to the public the fact that A, we're not responsible for a 6-year delay on things, and secondly, just how difficult our relations have been with BDO in trying to progress this, and that we have done everything that we can to try to do so.
I think through you, Chair, clearly we'll look at, and I'll engage with the monitoring officers just to check. I'm not sure that there'd be anything in there if it was FOI requested that I would look to and be able to stop that. So in that basis, I would look at, we would certainly look and have no problems publishing. I just need to check where and how we would do that. Certainly we were copying number of individuals in, including BDO. So we will have a look at that, and I will try and enact that through discussions with the monitoring officer.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on, Tom, to the next item in your paper.
So next I was going to deal with the position on 2022-2023. So my understanding again is there's no national movement since the committee last met. So there hasn't been a further stipulations issued nationally or legislation that would enable the approaches that have been suggested, either around skipping years or a series of backstop dates. And clearly, the later that moves on, the more difficult planning becomes in terms of resource allocation for some of the other items. What I should say briefly for Mr. Hussein's benefit, perhaps, is this reflects a sort of wider peculiar position that we're currently in with local government audit. That said, as we heard in the last item, EY have progressed the pensions audit for the 2022-23 year, and there is some work in relation to going concern cash flow and value for money that they're also undertaking. So from page 169 onwards, we then deal with areas that are progressing. For 21-22, EY have provided the progress report, which you can see at the appendix. There are a small number of remaining areas here, some of which are fairly intricate, but we're continuing to make progress through those. I don't know if you want me to pause there, Chair, and then we'll come on to future years.
Do we pause there and just hear about EY's progress? Because is that appropriate? We invite Jacob. Do you want to come back and just at this point just say about the work that you've been doing?
Yes, Chair. Yeah, I think this is a good time for me to come in. So happy to take you briefly through the audit results report, which I think starts on page 173. Like I say, I won't go into this in lots of detail, and I'll take the report as read, but again, happy to answer any questions. So if I take you to page 177, and as Tom alluded to, the areas that are outstanding in respect of 21-22 or were outstanding at the date of issuing this report. So on cash and journal, so items 1 and 5 of those bullet points, those areas are now in the review process, so they are largely complete. Item 3, so property, plant and equipment, we are expecting a response from the council today on that, which would hopefully allow for timely completion of that area. And in terms of item 4, so the debtors work, that is also now complete. We did identify a £3.4 million reclassification between debtors and creditors, so there's no bottom line impact of that adjustment, but that will be added to our adjustments list on the future slides when we get to a final results report. So I think it's fair to say the largest bit of outstanding work, and which has been for a little while, is the long-term debtors piece. So this is around the valuation of this land debtor. But again, I would say this has made real progress over the last 2 weeks since we issued this audit results report. So a large amount of this is looking at the future cash flow projections of this land, looking at comparable property sales, and I think we've had a lot of information from the council over the last 2 weeks to support that. So confident that we can get that item to a swift conclusion over the coming weeks as well. So in taking you through just to page 179, again, wasn't planning to go through each adjustment or difference in detail, but I think it's just fair to reflect on that uncorrected differences tab, that is a work in progress. So this probably isn't final uncorrected differences, and we do need to work with management to identify which of those will be moved to corrected, and that will be part of sort of the final exercise in terms of getting a final set of statements and working those adjustments through. Then just briefly on page 182, as it says, I'll provide a verbal update on these today. So of our 13 risks, 12 of those are now closed. So we've also closed the misstatements due to fraud or error risk, as that linked purely to journals. So the only risk area we do still have outstanding is that long-term debtor, of which I've already spoken. And then finally, the only other bit I wanted just to bring the committee's attention to was page 212. And again, as Tom's alluded to, we are making good progress with the value for money work as well. So this is sort of delayed, I guess, through the predecessor auditor position as well. But going forward, in terms of how we report through 21-22, we will be working to close those previous years as well. So I'd say we've made real strong progress on 18-19, 19-20, 20-21, 21-22, but also a good start into 22-23, as Tom said. So I think altogether this is coming into a good position where we'll hopefully get sort of timely closure of the 21-22 audit, And then as Tom's alluded to on in 22-23, still awaiting sort of further guidance as to exactly what work is required in that period. But happy to take any further questions on the detail of that report. That was quite a quick whistle-stop tour, so happy to take any detailed questions as well.
Okay, thanks so much, Jacob. On page 185, you refer to a number of issues identified through our audit that you'd like to bring to your attention. By your, do you mean management, or do you mean the committee? And if the committee, is there anything that we need to be doing about them at this stage, or do we wait for you and management to sort them out?
Sure. So by your, that is the attention of the committee. So these were deemed sort of important enough to bring to your attention. I think it's probably, I'm happy if Tom wants to say anything, but I guess, yeah, we would probably be looking for management to provide a response to those in term. But I think it's also fair to say that a number of these are already on management's radar and they are working on these. So yeah, I don't know, Tom, whether you wanted to say anything on that at all.
Yes, so just for the committee's benefit, so these were provided to the council earlier in the year, and we provided responses in a committee paper, I think, in the spring. And as Jacob says, we have been able to progress a number of these in preparation of subsequent accounts. So, for instance, the specialist valuation of the solar asset has been secured and dealt with. The approach to asset registers and the approach to disclosure of interests also picked up in future sets of accounts. So it's a helpful kind of collated set of recommendations across EY's work over a number of years. And yes, we acknowledge them and are taking them forward.
Okay, thank you. Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. This is a general question which I've probably been dying to ask since I joined the committee. And I'm not looking in the answer for a seminar on this subject, but in order to progress the 22-23 accounts in particular and get them out quickly, and in light of the general resource problem in auditing, I mean, to what extent is EY and KPMG in future going to be using AI techniques to get through the grind of audit? You know, clearly you're going to have to make decisions, as you always do when you come up against issues, and we understand that, although, as you know, my own personal view is that the valuation decisions are possibly not that meaningful in my view. But I mean, has AI played a part in your audits up and to date? How do you see the future? Not big seminar on where it might go, but will it
I can take that one.
Will it save resource?
Sure. I think absolutely. I think what we've seen sort of across the 5 or 4 years of doing these audits is probably more on the data analytics side, and we've certainly got a lot of well embedded processes in terms of how we efficiently gain assurance. So particularly on areas like payroll, we maybe 5-6 years ago we would have done a sample of a large number of payroll items. Now that's a balance we test as a whole relatively efficiently. Going forward, clearly, potentially not with us, but I think definitely I'd see more AI coming through in terms of invoice reading and things like that, so that rather than someone sat as they would have done with a big folder of invoices, it's something that's put into a clever robot of sorts. So yes, yeah, potentially not with us over the next 5 years, but it's definitely.
Will it speed up next year's audit though?
So I guess on 22-23 probably harks back to Tom's comment that we are still awaiting sort of further guidance as to exactly what that year's work program looks like, and are awaiting an announcement. So yeah, I don't have anything further really to say on the 22-23 audit position, other than we do await an announcement.
Okay, thank you. Chris.
On that subject, first of all, Chair, may I say that 40 years ago, I was quite excited to be attend a lecture on the subject of computerized auditing techniques. And I thought, oh, great, this is going to be really good and interesting. And of course, here we are 40 years later, and still audit is largely a It is still a lot of it's a mechanical process, but the idea that computers, let alone AI, play a major part in it, unfortunately, is rather low. There's a lot more technicality now in sampling sizes and a whole host of other things than there might have been 40 years ago. But I have to say that the idea that we are going to be able to get auditing done by machine is still a few years away yet. It will happen, I'm sure, ultimately, but I think it's not going to help us in next year's audit. Ultimately, on audit, the most important thing is the judgments which are made about the data. It's not the data itself. And we're a very long way away, I think, from those judgments being able to be made artificially. I think we'll continue to have to rely on humans to do that. But let's look at this, the audit that we're talking about and how it's progressed and what has been found. And we have to recognize that this has been a very, very good audit so far. And that isn't just down to the auditors, although it certainly is their half of the equation. But the other half of the equation is the finance staff here at County Council, the amount of work that they put in preparation for the audit and their ability to interact with the auditors in a speedy manner. It's a two-part process, two sides to it. Both sides have to work well in order for the whole audit to work well. The whole audit has worked well, so I think both sides deserve recognition for that, Chair.
I agree entirely. I think it's going really well at the moment. Any other comments, questions on? So thank you very much, Jacob. So if we go back, Tom, to your paper.
Yes, so then just lastly, we'll talk about the current year, and we have KPMG in the room, and the initial work has begun on 23-24. I think we flag up in the report that inevitably with a change of auditors, there are that brings with it different challenge and different challenges. Interestingly, data analytics is in a way that the sort of EY machine knows the council. KPMG isn't in that position yet, so that could be a difference that is a complication next year. I'd flag up in 2.4.4 the property and valuation issue, which you've seen from the differences section is a kind of higher risk area of the audit. We are making good progress and on track for the January timescales in terms of valuer reports, and also with the implementation of the asset management system, Concerto. So that bodes well, I think, in terms of timeliness of next year's position. And KPMG have been in a position to begin their planning work and send through initial kind of requests to the council, which is very encouraging compared to where we have been timescales for other audits. It is just the complication, and I know the team will appreciate Councillor Bowden's words a few moments ago that with multiple years progressing at once, that does make this more complicated. But very grateful to have KPMG here and for that familiarisation work to be underway.
Thank you, Tom. Emma or Sarah, do you want to say anything more at this stage? It's great to have you here and to have you doing all the preparation work that you're clearly doing.
Thank you. I think, well, firstly, yes, we fully appreciate the difficulty that the council is in having three sets of auditors essentially at the moment. So we are aware of the fine balance between us trying to get started, but equally we appreciate your priority at the moment is on concluding the FY22 year-end audit. So we're sort of happy to work with Tom and the team on what we can do without pushing it too far. Emma, was there anything you wanted to say just in terms of anything we've identified so far?
I know. I think we're on track. We've had good engagement, which is the key thing I think so far. So that's been great. So all of our initial requests, I know Tom's been working as best he can to get those back, and we will, as Sarah said, be flexible in terms of making sure that we can work with the council so that we're not a hindrance, but we are a help. So.
Thank you very much. And are either or both of you intending to come to future meetings, whether or not there's an item on the agenda which is related to you?
Yes, absolutely. So either both of us or at least one of us, and possibly Debbie, who's the manager. The plan is that we will attend all future meetings. So there will be some representation from KPMG. And what we're also organising is further meetings with the broader executive team, so we can start to build up our relationships, and that will also be quite helpful in terms of starting our work on value for money. We appreciate that EY have done well in catching up or are catching up, so we want to make sure that ideally when we conclude on our external audit work on the financial statements, we're concluding on value for money at the same time. So we thought that whilst we need to be careful about the burden we're placing on the finance team, there are other things that we can be doing more broadly with the council that don't interfere with that process. So that's all commencing as well, and Dawn is helping to set up some of those meetings.
Wonderful, thank you very much. We haven't got much left on the agenda, so feel free to stay for as much or as little of it as you wish. One of the things which is actually quite relevant to your future work is our review of effectiveness. Would it be helpful if we did that next, or are you happy to sort of hang on and we will aim to finish by 4 o'clock, chaps?
That's absolutely fine. I'm happy to stay, even if Emma needs to leave.
Let's work through in the order in which they're on the agenda, and we'll see how we get on. So item 8, so we have, just for the minutes, we've noted the report and received the appended progress report from the EY regarding 21-22. And we'd like to pass on our thanks to officers and EY for all their work they're doing on the accounts. So item 8 is the internal audit progress report. Mairead Claydon, who is head of internal audit, is online and hopefully is going to introduce this report. Hi, Mairead.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, everyone. So in front of you, this item is the Internal Audit Progress Report, which is an update on the work completed by Internal Audit to the 31st of October 2023. Some key things to highlight. So at section 3, we show the audit reports which have been finalised and draft reports issued. As requested in the previous meeting of this committee, we're also now showing the number of actions agreed for each of the final audits that have been issued. So you have that information in front of you for the first time as well. Section 5.2. We include an update on staffing and resources. I'm very happy to confirm we have appointed to the vacant senior auditor post and deputy head of internal audit posts. And we have 2 new members of staff who are expected to start in January. So we're very much keeping our fingers crossed that all goes smoothly with those appointments. Also to note, we have appointed TIAA Limited as a co-source partner. Currently, they're commissioned to deliver 4 audits for us. We've agreed the terms of reference for the Section 106 funding, procurement governance and rental income audits. And we've been told by TIAA that we can expect the first draft report, which will be the Section 106 funding report, by the 8th of December. So good to see that delivery of that work is progressing as well. Section 6, as ever, shows the updated internal audit plan, which shows the next 4 quarters of planned work by the team. And then you also have Annex A to this report, which shows you the work which is currently underway within the team. Section 7 gives details on the implementation of audit actions, and we've had some very good news this afternoon, which is that the Cabinet Office have confirmed the Council have reobtained their Public Services Network certification. So that means that the outstanding essential rated action that we've all been following for some time now is now closed. We've seen the certification from the Cabinet Office, so that's really good news, and thanks and well done to colleagues in IT for getting that completed. We are proposing that for future cycles of reporting, the collection of updates on overdue actions is going to be approached in a slightly different way. So previously, internal audit officers have been chasing individuals for updates on actions. We are now going to be implementing a process whereby the executive assistants for each directorate will do the initial collection of information and updates, which will mean that audit can focus their time on reviewing the evidence for closed actions. And it should allow DMTs as well to have a clearer overview of what the outstanding actions are within their directorates. So we're hoping that that will be a good piece of progress in terms of reporting and implementation of the implementation of actions. Section 9 in the report gives an update on fraud investigations and whistleblowing. We are seeing a slightly higher proportion of cases in terms of the whistleblowings that we've received compared to last year. But more importantly, we have had several cases that have required a full audit review investigation. So that has taken some time away from the rest of the audit plan. And you will see that there are 3 investigation reports currently at draft, which I would expect will be bringing the details of those to the next meeting of this committee. Also worth noting in regards to whistleblowing, at section 9.4, there's an update around the annual whistleblowing report. So we're hoping to bring that to the February meeting of this committee. That will include the results of the annual whistleblowing survey that we undertake at Cambridgeshire. It will also bring the results of a benchmarking exercise that we are undertaking with the whistleblowing charity Protect, which was an action that came out of this committee the previous time that the whistleblowing policy was reviewed. And then finally, section 10, just to bring to your attention, there is an update on key financial systems audits. We have now received the payroll audit report, which gave an opinion of satisfactory, which is equivalent to the moderate opinion that we have at Cambridgeshire. We have now confirmed we will be doing the payroll and pensions audits for the lead authorities this year, and the Cambridgeshire team have issued terms of reference for the payroll and pensions audits in draft, and we'll be starting walkthrough testing on payroll next week and pensions the week after. So we're trying to hit the ground running on those pieces of work, and we'll bring further updates on those as they progress. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mairead. Go on, Jeff.
Thank you, Mary. Incredibly busy, breathtakingly busy, and I don't want to add to you any further pressure to you, but you were kind enough to tell us that the Section 106 internal audit will be completed next week. And I'm very pleased to hear that because, as you know, I have a particular interest in the outcome of that. My question really is, can you share, when can the report be shared with us? Because it would be invidious, I think, to wait until the next committee meeting. Are we able to see that report before the next committee meeting, or can we see the report, period?
Thank you, Councillor Seif. So we are expecting to receive the draft version of the report has been agreed.
Hang on a minute, Mairead. We lost you for a moment, and now you're back. Or you're
Apologies. Am I back?
If you take your camera off, turn your camera off, and just try the voice bit.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Lovely. Sorry. Yes, so I'm not sure how much you heard, but the final report for Section 106 funding, we've been given a date of 22nd of December for that final report to be issued. I'm very happy to share a copy of the report as soon as it's final with any members of the committee who would like to see that.
That would be very helpful. Thank you. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 issues. And again, may I express my thanks to officers for continuing to produce the reports about outstanding items, both in terms of age and in terms of priority, in an appropriate order. So the most important and the most urgent and the oldest things are at the top. At the last meeting of this committee, I did express my concern about what was happening with the Healthy Child Programme and the Integrated Drugs and Alcohol Treatment System contracts, and the move towards open book contract management. And I must admit, I was puzzled by why there had been such a failure to move forwards on this within an appropriate timescale. So I'm very grateful for the information which has been provided in paragraph 7.2, and quite a lot of information in paragraph 7.2, explaining some of the detail of why there has been such a difficulty here, and explaining why we have a revised target date which is as late as the 30th of April 2024, which is a long, long time since the original recommendation was made from internal audit about this matter. So I'm very grateful about that. I just wonder whether, on two things. The first is, if that revised target date of the 30th of April 2024 slips or is likely to slip, is it possible for a report to be made to this committee, maybe at our February meeting? If it looks as though 30th of April 24 won't be happening, could we have a report to the committee explaining why it won't be happening? And the second is it possible for this item, paragraph 7.2 information, to be provided to the adults and health committee, so that they can be aware of the detail of what is happening on these two contracts? Because until I read this report, even though I'm on that committee, I wasn't aware of this information, and I believe it's the sort of information which members of a service committee should be aware of.
Thank you. Mairead, do you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bowden. So in terms of bringing a report to the committee regarding any slips or delays, yep, absolutely happy to get in touch with the Director of Public Health and ask her to bear that in mind in terms of the implementation of the action, and looking at a February date for an update report if it does look like that date won't be met. With regards to the information in paragraph 7.2, I believe this committee is able to sort of make a formal referral of any matters to another committee. I'm going to look at Dawn to check I'm correct there, but I believe that if the committee wish to do that, they would be allowed to do so under the Constitution.
Given the size of these contracts, they're two of the biggest contracts we have in public health, and given the issues with third parties as well on this, which I won't go into, it's all in paragraph 7.2, may I request that such a referral is made so that the relevant committee can be made aware of what's happening?
I think that's a good idea. If nobody's got any objections, are you happy to organise that? Sorry, go on.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I was going to my second point. The second question, again, in the list of outstanding items, sorry to say that one item I find quite interesting in life is VAT, and particularly partial exemption. And I see all the accountants around the table are smiling because they understand exactly how funny that comment is. But on the partial exemption issue, it looks a little bit to me like a sledgehammer to crack a nut. So maybe the nut is larger than I realise. I realise we may have more than one VAT registration in everything that the council is involved with. There may be more than just the council's VAT registration. But may I ask the Section 151 officer, given that it's mentioned in here that the Section 151 officer will get regular reports and is notified about this, are we at all close in any VAT registration connected with this council to the partial exemption limit?
So obviously we'll get that update nearer to the year end in terms of any further progress. But at this stage, the last time I checked recently, no, we're not at this stage, and I'm not anticipating anything that would come in that would cause us to do that. But obviously, we review that on a quarter by quarter basis.
And it's that comment that you've just made, which reflects what's in the paper, which just puzzles me a bit. Because if we are nowhere near the partial exemption limit, then there would need to be a very significant change in the activities of the council, particularly with regard to making any exempt suppliers, which in order to change how close we were to the partial exemption limit. So if we're not close to the partial exemption limit, why do we need to do the calculation every quarter?
Simply because we don't want to fall foul of any position in March where we have a forward payment commitment, capital related. So that have been a number of instances, a few instances in local government where some councils have fallen foul of this in relation to their capital programme and not forward thinking in terms of the cash flow and some of the large scale elements of that. So it is vital that we continue to review that, even if it remains a low risk.
But isn't the main danger that we have as far as potentially reaching the partial exemption limit on the numerator side, not the denominator side? And it's surely to do with our income rather than our expenditure, and our having exempt sales, for want of a better word, exempt output, which is relevant rather than the input.
I think you've got to look at both sides in relation to that, and quite happy to run outside of this meeting in terms of the examples of the quarterly reviews. So
I'd be really grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mohammed.
And on the payroll audit, appreciate that was a kind of a limited size audit. My question was, we raised 2 essential issues, 7 high medium issues based on a limited sample size, but it's rated as a satisfactory audit. So just trying to comprehend how we get to that position. If we rated essential issues that expected they would be significant. But yeah, just to clarify that.
Yeah, so this is one of the audits that was delivered for us by West Northamptonshire Council. So I can't say that I'm privy to the full details of their thinking on why they selected one assurance opinion over another. What I will say is that the way they conducted the review this year, they did it almost as 2 audits. So they did an audit of kind of payroll administration, I suppose, and then they did a separate review looking at the payroll control account reconciliations, which is the area which the 2 essential recommendations relate to. So it may be that they felt that as the essential recommendations related very specifically to control account reconciliations, that was the reason that they've given a satisfactory opinion despite the 2 essentials. But that is slightly speculative on my part. It's certainly something that we'll be looking at as part of this year's audit.
Yeah, I think the only thing that gives me comfort is that it's on the audit plan coming for this team to look at. So hopefully that would maybe raise some of the issues in this space as well, because I'm surprised by the numbers of issues raised on a sample of 1, essentially.
Yep, I agree. And I'm very keen for us to start our compliance testing.
Thank you. Can I raise a few more questions, Mairead? Whilst recognising that you've been short-staffed and you've got a tremendous amount of work here, the progress in year on page 269 is indicating that we're not actually doing as well as I would hope we're doing 7 months into the end of the financial year. So there's something like 21% of work which will not close until the end of the financial year, it says, but there's also an awful lot of other work which is still to be done. So my first question is, are you confident that we will be able to do all this work with the resources that you've got available and these additional consultants that you've taken on? And then the second question, going back to comments that people have made about the recommendations that you've made on previous reports, there's quite a lot of medium recommendations where the actions are overdue and the date is still to be confirmed. And what action are you able to take with directors? Unfortunately, Stephen Moyer's not here today, but with directors or chief executive to chase the relevant people to ensure that they do give you dates so these can be delivered in a timely fashion?
Thank you, Chair. I'll answer the second one first, as it's fresh in my mind. So the key thing that we are trying to do is implement this new process of chasing on follow-up actions. So we are trying to push the management of the implementation of actions away from being kind of within the audit team's gift to chase and remind individual officers, have it be administered by the executive assistants within each directorate, so that there is much more oversight from our executive directors of the actions within their area. That will also mean that the process we are hoping will take place on a monthly basis. So previously we have been following up on actions aligned to the committee cycle. So essentially about a month before a committee report is due, we would begin following up within the audit team. That's just because of, you know, the resource pressures we have in our team. It's not practical given the volume of actions for us to chase every single month. But when we implement the new process with the executive assistants, as it were, we should be able to make sure that the chasing of actions becomes kind of an essential part of the monthly cycle within each directorate. Michael has kindly allowed his directorate to be the guinea pig for this process. So we have already started that within finance and resources, and we are intending to be rolling that out across all the directorates from January. So I am optimistic that that will help us in terms of making sure that the progress and the implementation of actions is more front and center for our executive directors in terms of their awareness about what their officers are reporting to committees. And then secondly, with regards to...
Hang on a minute,
oh,
Mairead.
sorry.
I think, Michael, do you want to confirm that, and that your executive assistant will be filling in the blanks as well as chasing the actions?
I can confirm that we've actually done this for 2 months now, so we have this up and running and in progress. I was just going to note that the chief executive, who's on leave today, is absolutely chasing every one of us in terms of the actions, and we are regularly reviewing this at CLT. So I can say that it is definitely fully embedded in CLT.
Thank you. Mairead, do you want to answer the first question, which is about, are you making the progress that you would hope to make at this time of year?
Thank you, Chair. So with regards to this report shows us to the end of October. So mindful that we are now kind of a month further on than that. I would say at the end of October, we were more or less where we needed to be in terms of our achievement against the plan. During November, we have fallen back from that slightly. Part of that will be recovered when we receive the work from TIAA, because clearly we're likely to get kind of several audit reports from them within a reasonably short period of time. And we will have our 2 new members of staff starting at the beginning of January, which will mean that we have a full quarter at the end of the year with 2 additional members of staff, which I'm optimistic should make a difference and hopefully will put us in a position to achieve the plan that we've set for ourselves.
Okay, thank you very much. Nothing else from anybody? In which case, we received your revised internal audit report for 23-24. The one thing I didn't mention, Mairead, was the thing we discussed about. It includes some specific work on looking at the budgeting and business planning process to make sure that we don't get ourselves into the situation that some other local authorities have of going bust. I don't know whether that will work or not, but at least we can confirm that our processes are in order and that we're doing everything that we possibly can to ensure that we don't go bust. Right, let's move on then to item 9. Very briefly, Mairead, on the corporate risk register, you can confirm that Strategy Resources and Performance have looked at it, and they're responsible for the development and oversight of it. And our function is slightly different to check the processes being adopted. Chris will have seen that CLT have reviewed the scoring system and determined to keep it as it is, at least for the moment. So hopefully, Chris, you'll be happy with that. Chris, Mairead, I'm conscious of the time, and I don't want Jeff to walk out at 4 o'clock and then we become inquorate, although we probably won't. But we'll be all right, won't we? All right. Anyway, I'll pass things over to Chris now.
Thank you. I'm really grateful that the CLT Risk and Assurance Group considered this matter, and I'm not going to press it any further, other than to say that inherently, if you have a 5x5 risk matrix, something which is in category 5 is not 5 times as bad or 5 times as likely to happen as something which is in category 1. And failing to have a more weighted risk matrix could produce and can produce distortions, which is why some local authorities and some companies are now moving to a weighted system rather than a linear system. But fine, the matter's being considered, and we'll wait till good practice starts becoming more common, and then it may come back to this council. My big concern continues to be, and it's not so bad on a 5x5 matrix as it is on a 4x4 matrix, which some councils still use, I'm sorry to say, that in terms of severity, there are 5s and there are 5s. And taking, for example, the safeguarding issue for children, sometimes I feel that just scoring something 5 fails to recognize that some 5s are much more serious potentially than other 5s. What we don't have, and what exists in the NHS, is this concept of a never event. And that almost supersedes the risk matrix, which also exists. The problem in the NHS is they then start counting out the number of never events they have, which is almost contradictory. But it does emphasize that just the matrix merely by itself isn't sufficient. And I'm sure that members of staff, senior members of staff, are more than well aware that just because something is in a particular box doesn't mean to say that further judgment shouldn't take place. And it's in connection to that I go to the table 1, the corporate risk register overview that we've been given for October 2023. And as it happens to be, it just happens, the example I've been giving for the last few meetings is the one which is highlighted, and that is the risk of failure of the council's arrangements to safeguard vulnerable children and young people. And we're told that the risk score, sorry, I've read that the wrong way around there. The risk score there is the one which has gone down from 20 to 15, which I'm pleased about. But my concern is the following, and that is that what we see here in front of us is we see the tip of the iceberg, and any audit committee only sees the tip of the iceberg of a risk management process. Most of the process goes on invisible to us at a lower level. And whilst we see really raw high-level scores, there are lower scores lower down, which are compiled by members of staff, and the whole process then ends up with the small number of items that we see in front of us. And it's on that risk of failure. It's the vulnerable children one in particular that concerns me. I'm really, really concerned that we continue to have the maximum possible focus on our responsibility to vulnerable children and young people. We've seen it happen in other authorities where some desperately bad things have happened, and it's been shown that the council has been at least partly at fault. And I wonder if it's appropriate, Chairman, I'm not asking for a definite answer now, I'm happy for this to be taken away, but for consideration to be given on that issue particularly, but maybe others, where some of the lower level indicators which exist, which we don't normally get to see, may be appropriate for us to see. Because I'd be really interested to see at a lower level just what our detailed consideration is of where there are high level risks as far as vulnerable children and young people are concerned, what the likelihood is deemed to be of those, and what action is being taken to reduce the level of risk if the risk currently stands at a higher level than our risk appetite. Now, we see overall we've gone back within our risk appetite for the whole area, but that this is a composite figure made up of lots and lots of different things, I'm sure. And I'd be really interested to see if any of the component parts are such that we should be interested. Now, I'm not asking for an answer straight away, Chair, but I wonder if some consideration could be given to that by the time of the next meeting.
Thank you very much. Michael or Mairead, do you want to answer that? First of all, is that a responsibility of this committee, or is it something which strategy, resources and performance should be looking at? And if it is ours, what's the best way of doing it? Or is it something we should be passing on to the service committees?
I think it's that latter point, Chair. The Audit and Accounts Committee is looking at the overall strategy, the operation of that. Specific related risks would be then the Service and Policy Committee. So I think in this instance, it would be CYP Committee.
Should we try that first and see what happens? And if we don't get satisfaction, we can have it back here and ask some more questions. Okay, Mairead, is there anything else on that paper that I should have raised that you wanted to highlight?
No, thank you, Chair. I think that's everything.
Okay, thank you. There are a whole load of actions which have been taken, which people should be aware of, and one of which was the risk management training. And if you haven't watched it or attended it, then I would encourage you to watch it if you want to learn a bit more about risk management and how the council goes about doing it. Right, thank you very much. So we've noted the corporate risk register as presented to the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee on the 31st of October. The next item 10 is a report on the Audit and Accounts Committee review of effectiveness. Mairead, would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to keep it brief. So the final paper I'm bringing you today covers the self-assessment exercise, which was undertaken by this committee on the 8th September 2023, in line with SIPFA's 2022 position statement on audit committees in local authorities and police. You can see the SIPFA position statement in all its glory at Appendix 2, and you can see the checklist that was completed as part of the review and the self-assessment by committee at Appendix 1. In general, I think there was a lot of positive feedback about how the committee was functioning and how it was complying with best practice. So the report in front of you highlights some of those key areas of discussion at section 2. And then most importantly, within section 3, there is an action plan which captures the actions that were discussed at that assessment that we're planning to undertake to improve the areas that can be improved upon. And all actions are currently planned to be implemented by the 31st of March 2024. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and thank you for all those who attended. Is there anything that we've missed or items that you would have expected to see on the report that we've not included? I was
just very quickly, as I'm here, still here. The governor, I mean, it's emphasised in the report, but we did talk a lot about governance and the importance of that and looking at that. And I think that is in the report. So I just want to make that point.
Yeah. Is Emma online or not? Emma Duncan. Emma, are you online?
Yes, I am, Chair.
Sorry, I didn't bring you in earlier, but is there anything that you would want to say about the link between this committee and constitution and ethics and where governance sits or doesn't sit? Because I think that's one of the complications for our committee that maybe some other authorities, for example, the combined authority which I'm on, the Audit and Governance Committee, they don't have a separate Constitution and Ethics Committee, I don't think.
That's correct, and some councils don't. It is more seamless if you have governance that is picked up by a particular committee. However, it's not absolutely necessary. I mean, good governance is the job of a lot of all of us, really, not just one committee. So I think that there are some things we could add to the committee's terms of reference. I think there is going to be, moving forward, looking at the best value, the draft best value and intervention guidance that's recently been issued, a lot more focus on the annual governance statement. So I think members will be looking at that in more detail, particularly monitoring action plans as we move through the year. One of the one of the quotes that struck me recently from Max Caller is that what he said around authorities in intervention, that they all got there in different ways, but at the heart of it was poor governance. So I think that in terms of the role of this committee, you want to make sure that nothing is falling in between the gaps. It's quite okay to have a Constitution and Ethics Committee that deal with the detail of the Constitution and the protocols that we have in place to ensure that good governance. But from this committee's perspective, there is a more wide-ranging role that you have, not just in relation to the finances, but just in terms of the governance of the authority. And to be fair, that does come through a lot. When Mairead does her internal audit report, she's not just reporting financial issues, she's talking about control issues and governance issues. So I think from that perspective, the committee has a good handle on that. I think as we move forward, you will want reassurance that not only do we have the systems in place that promote good corporate governance, that we have a culture in place that supports that as well. So I think there are things that we can do, but I think the review of effectiveness has picked that up.
Thank you very much. That satisfies your comment? Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. So we have agreed the action plan at section 3 of the report, which has been developed through the review of effectiveness. Final item this afternoon is the committee agenda plan. Dawn, are there any updates to the plan?
Nothing from me, Chair.
Is there anything, Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Something came up. It's important the section 151 officer hears this because it's no trouble, don't worry. Something came up at the meeting this week of the Assets and Procurement Committee, which I found a bit worrying from an assurance point of view. And it's to do with the contracts that we've got. We were told in the meeting that the council's got over 750 contracts on its contract register, and those are managed by over 250 contract managers with an overall value of £4.6 billion. And risk assessments had been undertaken by the procurement team. The procurement team, this is in response to, so shows how long ago it is, a BDO recommendation on best value. And the procurement team are looking at the procurement cycle as a whole, which is entirely appropriate. And as part of that cycle, they are looking at the way in which our contracts are managed by our managers. Now, I've got no reason to believe that any of the contracts managed by our managers are not being managed entirely properly, but the reason that this is now being done by the procurement team is to give assurances to that. And what's interesting is that the first 10 risk assessments that they have undertaken and looked at have resulted in mitigation plans having been established by the procurement team with the relevant contract managers, which I found interesting. But this has only happened for 10, admittedly the 10 highest value ones, but only 10 of the 750 contracts have been subject to this process, which is less than 2%. And what worried me was the paragraph in the report which stated that contract risk assessments is an ongoing process, and it is hoped that within the next 6 to 12 months, the team will have a comprehensive list of the council's highest risk contracts to ensure that their contract managers are supported as far as possible. Now, our section 151 officer agreed the word hope was a slightly unfortunate one to have been put in that paragraph, but it's an important issue, given that mitigation plans have already, presumably appropriately, been agreed on the top 10 value ones. I'm quite keen to see this process move forwards quickly. And I wonder if it's possible for us in our May meeting in 6 months' time to have an update on how well progress has taken place for the procurement team in listing, examining, and prioritising mitigation plans for our highest value contracts. Just for an overview, I'm not interested in the specifics about the individual contracts, but just to make sure that we're on track for this hoped for 6 to 12 months for the highest risk contracts.
So I think through you, Chair, I was just trying to work out when the Asset and Procurement Committee meets in that cycle, because we will clearly be preparing updates back to that committee as well. So I'm just trying to work out, I don't want to be doing 2 sets of reporting that are misaligned in terms of their cycle. So if Assets and Procurement will say the end of June and Audit is the start of May, that might not work, but certainly happy to pick it in up through the risk assessment that we report, and it is within the financial risk, one of the factors of a smaller bit. So I will look to endeavour to come back to May with something, even if that then is referring on to the Assets and Procurement Committee, but without just quickly looking at the reporting cycle, we will endeavour to take that action away.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is on the meta side here that we overlook this rather than the greater detail that's quite possible that strategy and resource, or rather assets and procurement, might go into. But if it turns out that May is inappropriate because of the relative cycles, then having a separate report in September, I think, would be useful. So either way will do perfectly well, because either way will ensure that the pressure is on to make that hope into a reality, and that we do find within 12 months that at least the most significant of our contracts are subject to this whole procurement cycle process.
Excellent. Okay. Well, let's make a note of that for the future agenda, so we don't forget it. Thank you. I think that's the end of the meeting. So the next meeting is on Tuesday, not a Friday afternoon, Tuesday, the 6th of February at 2 p.m. And the future meetings are included in the agenda plan on page 262 as well, including all the ones in the next municipal year. Thank you for your time this afternoon. I hope you all have a good weekend.